of acacia wood, 5 cubits long, 5 wide. He's going to go on with the whole altar, the 9 yards, down to the bronze network beneath the ledge and the 4 rings. If you read on down to 6, the poles with bronze overlaid, he inserted the poles into the rings of the altar, which he made to carry it. Moreover, verse 8, he made the layers of the laver of bronze. The lavers where they washed, the big giant, like bird bath is what it was, just a big giant washing place. Made the laver of bronze and from the mirrors of the serving women who served at the doorway of the tent of the meeting. Then he made the court on the south side of the hanging of the court, fine twisted linen, 100 cubits, 20 pillars, 20 sockets made of bronze, the hooks, and on it goes, all the way down to, all the way down to verse 20, all the pegs of the tabernacle. Now, this is the number of the things for the tabernacle. The tabernacle of the testimony, as they were numbered according to the commands given of Moses, for the service of the Levites by the hand of Ithamar, the son of Aaron the priest. Now Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Ur, of the tribe of Judah, made all that the Lord had commanded of Moses. And with him was Oliab, the son of Ashimach, and the tribe of Dan, and the engraver and skillful workman, and a weaver of blue and purple and scarlet material and fine linen. And all the gold that was used for the work, and all the work in the sanctuary, even the gold of the wave offering, was 29 talents. That's a considerable amount of gold, actually. 730 shekels, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. And the silver of the congregation who was numbered was over 100 talents and 1,775 shekels, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. And bekah a head, that is a half shekel, according to the shekel of the sanctuary, for each one who passed over of those who were numbered from the 20 years old and upward, for 603,550 men. This is the first time we actually get a number of how many Jews there are out there in the desert. Before that, everybody always says, where do they get that number? There's 600,000 of them out there. Right here is the time. For 603,550 men. And the hundreds of talents of silver were for the casting of the sockets and the sanctuary and the sockets of the veil. 100 sockets for the 100 sockets, the talent of the sockets. And the 1,775 shekels he made for the hooks. For the pillars overlaid their tops and made bands for them. And the bronze of the wave offering was 70 talents, 2,400 shekels. And it was made, and with it he made the sockets of the doorway of the tent of the meeting, and the bronze altar and its bronze gate, and the utensils of the altar, and the sockets of all the court, and all around the sockets of the gate of the court, and the pegs of the tabernacle, and the pegs of the court all around. Basically what this is this thing is a fortune. It is a Fort Knox, if you will, of gold and silver and bronze. Got to remember, bronze was very important at this day and age, not quite to this extent of gold or silver, but it was extremely important, particularly in terms of weaponry. This was the Bronze Age. I don't know if you want to lay a sectarian history over against the Jewish history, where you have the Bronze and the Iron Age and all this other stuff, and steel and all that. This is the Bronze Age. We're talking roughly 1450 BC. Okay, when the exile, that's an early dating. It can go 200 years back if you want. But nevertheless, basically you are in the height of the Bronze Age, which means the weapons were made of bronze. The swords were made of bronze. The shields, the armor was made of bronze. The number one use of bronze, in fact, was weaponry. It was not religion or temples or things of this nature, because it was a very durable metal. It was the best they had at that time. Iron had not yet been introduced yet. Steel, many hundreds of years later. But for right now, bronze is the best they could do. So, in light of that, when you hear all this stuff about bronze, that was equally as valuable as the silver or the gold. And I think, there probably were a few people, particularly the war guys, the soldiers, or the captains that were thinking, what are we throwing all this bronze into that temple for? Why don't we do it silver? Whatever. We could use that bronze. We can make swords out of that bronze. And there might have been some little grumbling under the table. Why are we using this for sockets and poles and coverings and stuff of that nature? And again, we get back down to at what part in your life are you going to deviate from the Lord's instruction and say, it's okay not to do what God asks me to do? And that's part of why we have these incredible... First of all, we have an incredible schematic as to what they built in the temple of the Lord and the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant, and the whole priestly system. We have an incredible schematic as to the function of the priests. And it wasn't just a, hey, show up and go, all right, we'll slay this animal, be done with it. I got a barbecue at 8. No, you didn't do that. It was a long ritual, day after day, all day. Out there, yes, slaying sheep, slaying animals, and collecting the blood and roasting the fats and all the sinews and that stuff on the altar. And the washing, the ceremonial washing, not once or twice, but all day long, over and over and over again. And on it went for 16 hours a day, from early morning to late in the evening. The fires needed to be kindled. Somebody had to keep the fires on that altar moving. Wood had to be gathered. They're in a desert, remember this. And they had to find things to burn. Sometimes it was animal dung. Sometimes it was, wood, if they had wood, or bramble, or bushes, or whatever. But they had to tend those fires and keep those fires going. And then with all that going on, all the effort there, then you had the priests and you had the women over here, and they were all in charge of a lot of the drying and washing in cloths. And then once they were used, they couldn't be used a second time. So the ladies had to go and clean those and bring fresh ones back. You have no concept of what's going on here, just in order that we humans might enter the presence of God and be welcome. And see, people say, oh, I got to get up and go to church. It's already almost 11. Oh, Chair's going to tell some stupid story. I know it. What a bother. You have no idea what the bother was to worship in this day and age. You wanted to come before the Lord. You wanted Him to give you the time of day. You wanted Him to, above all else, forgive your sins and your iniquities. And remove His wrath upon you and bless your home and bless your family. Buddy, you didn't just roll in when you had a few minutes between meetings and said, yo, God, it's me, take care of it. Which I'm sad to say is most of Christianity today. I'll go if they have a big enough choir. I'll go if they have an orchestra. I'll go if they're presenting the singing Christmas trees. I'll go if they're, it's got to be if they're having a luncheon. You know what? Our attendance is always better on luncheon days. Do you ever notice that? I hate to say that, but it's true. Let's face it. People like to eat. And they like to eat with each other. And I'm not going to be judgmental here, but I think a little bit of me, a little bit of all of us thinks, come on, Sharon, let's get this done. We've got a great picnic out there. Let's get to it. And I joke about that sometimes. I say, I'm only going to preach 5 minutes today so you can get to that chicken. Of course, Gary's already out here eating it anyway, so it's him and Doug. Oh, Lord. But they had no idea what was required of man, of woman, of humankind. What was required of us to come into the presence of the Lord. Of course, the result was if you didn't do it to the uttermost letter of the law, then the consequence in their case was death. And there was a lot of priests over the history of Israel. If you read Bill Bright's History of Israel, a lot of priests that screwed up and they died. Even Eli's 2 sons, the great prophet Eli, the great priest Eli, Phinehas and Hophni, his 2 sons, They came in and said, "Yo, God, what's up? Forgive us our sins. We got some nice chuckles for dinner tonight." And the Lord's anger burned because they did not fulfill the statute or the commandment of God. And the fire swept off the altar and consumed both of them. And they were reduced to ash. Just like that. Whoa, that's a bad day. See what I'm saying? We have no concept of that today in Christianity, sadly. We've got Jesus, When I was in Kentucky, I've told some of you this. When I was in Kentucky, there was an old preacher there, old country preacher named Robert Woods. I'll never forget this guy. He was about as redneck could get. Kentucky as Kentucky could get. I mean, you couldn't make the boy any more of a hillbilly than he was. But he did love Jesus. I'm convinced of that. And I think he was a good man of God. But he would preach, and he would preach some sermons every once in a while. I'd just cringe and go, "Oh, Lord, you did not say that." Well, yeah, he did. And not only did he say it, he meant it. And he preached a sermon once on Easter Sunday morning, which was great. And Carol and I attended. I don't know if she remembers, because, she's thinking about other stuff. But me, I'm a minister, so I'm thinking. I'm analyzing. And his sermon was, "Hang on up there, good buddy Jesus." And he talked like he was on a CB radio the whole time. Like he's a trucker. Remember that when that was popular? A breaker. "Hey, good buddy Jesus." And the whole sermon was about, "Hang on up there, good buddy Jesus. I ain't no need to get down there. Just give me a little bit of that love, forgive my grace, and let me get in front of you here, because I got a smoky behind me. He's chasing me down off." And the whole thing was a radio conversation between him and Jesus. But Jesus, no need for you to do nothing. Not a whole lot of need for me to do anything. But, let me just get past you. You take care of that smoking, and I'll go on my way, and I won't bother you anymore, basically. And you can just hang on up there, good buddy Jesus. And I'm thinking, wow. Now, as flippant as that seems to me, to him it was serious. In man's modern day approach to God, we have as little or no respect for God as possible. A little bit, just so we don't get clobbered, don't get mashed, But do we really come before the Lord, as the Scripture says, with fear and trembling? A hymn writer once wrote 1,000,000 years ago a song of prayer, and it's based on the Hebrew song of prayer. And it begins, it's in our blue book actually. I like it. Cindy hates it because it's kind of dirty and she don't like to play it. But it's called "Let All Mortal Flesh Keep Silent." Read that. And what they're talking about in that hymn is coming before the Ark of the Covenant with the seraphim, the cherubim, all there ready, housing the presence of and keeping the presence of God. And how dare we even consider coming into that presence with anything to say? You see. You shut up, you drop to your knees, and you keep silent. You are in the presence of God. Have you any idea? You stand that close to oblivion. And see, most of us don't even know it. If we were to go on a ride or a dangerous something, we would suit up and protect ourselves and put on all this stuff, right? Or if you were to go to a nuclear something, a plant, and they'd put you in all these lead coats and put you in, walk you around with masks and everything on. All this protective gear, And yet we come into the presence of God without a thought or a care in the world. Wow. Now, Tom, aren't you being a little bit over dramatic? Am I? The Scripture says a number of times, 8 or 9 to be specific, I, the Lord, do not change. Ever. I'm the same yesterday, today, and forever. I will not change. Not one iota, the dot of the I. Not one iota of my law will change or ever pass away. What is will always be. Who I am, I will always be. Question, as we start. When is it okay in the walk of your life to depart from the way of God, the respect of God, the honor of God, and think it's okay? Well, I don't know. I can't make that call except for myself, and that is, with God's grace go I each step staying on that path. As the Scriptures would tell us, turning neither to the left nor to the right. But as Paul said, fixing my eyes on both the author and the finisher of my faith. And running that race before me. Laying aside anything and everything that would tempt me, encumber me, or pull me off that path. In that, then, my hope continues. In that alone. What? In staying on that path, Christocentric, focused on the author and the finisher of your faith. In light of that passage, when is it okay to get off the track and run on a different course? Never. Well, Tom, is it okay that we saunter into sanctuary? Sadly, our culture has dictated that, or permitted it. Let's say that. When I was a kid growing up, any of you ever been in the Catholic Church back in the 50s? Oh my goodness, you did not saunter into the Catholic sanctuary. You came in with reverence. Little girls had their heads covered. And little boys tied up, church straight, fucking 6 years old, walking down here, and you came to the front and you genuflected and you knelt and you praised God and begged His respect before you went and sat. And you sat quietly. You didn't fiddle with cell phones or purses or toys or lunches or coffee. You sat quietly. And those services were law. Remember that? Lord, were they long. I was an altar boy. Even worse for us. Even worse. Because we were up there on the paraclete with the chancellary and the priests. So we really couldn't screw up at all. And there was the candle ever burning that symbolized God was there. And every kid knew that. I ain't going in there. Oh, I ain't going in there. God's in there. I ain't going in there. You know, after school, kids screwing around in the sanctuary. I ain't going in there. Do we have that today? What happened to that reverence of God? You want to know a treatise on that? Read Malachi. Read the book of Malachi. You know what it's about? It's about when man got to the point where we don't need to do this honoring God stuff anymore. And the Lord shows up and He's pissed off. Where is my honor, says the Lord. You say you honor me. You call me Lord and Master and King, as you should, not because I am. But you come sauntering in here as if you had anything better to do. Where is my honor, said the Lord. In fact, Jesus goes so far as to say, I wish there was one of you smart enough to not even come. Don't even bother kindling your fire on the altar. I won't receive it. I'll hear nothing you have to say. In fact, He says, I will take the manure of your worship and rub it on your face and on the faces of your children, so they be just as ugly as you. Pretty powerful stuff. And it's all about the day man decided maybe we don't have to honor God so much anymore. The Lord said, make 20 sockets, you better make 20 sockets. He said, make 100 curtains, you better make 100 curtains. He said, use this much bronze, you better use that much bronze. When did it become okay to not do what God asks us to do? It's all an attempt for Him to teach us about who He is. And the honor and the respect and the dignity therein. He is always creator, and we will always be creation. He is always infinite. We are always terminal. And there's no way around it. I remember an old guy dying in the hospital. I was a young minister, about 23, 28, 4 or 5. I don't know. And I went to see him, and in those days I was kind of scared to death myself still at 24, let's face it. And I went in there. And I asked him, I remember asking him, I can't remember, it's James. I said, James, are you scared to die? I wanted to know as much, as a young minister. And he looked at me and he said, Tom, I'm not scared to die. Question is, are you scared to die? And I looked at him and said, James, I'm 24. That doesn't make any difference. Doesn't make any difference. In another day or two, I will die right here in this bed. Maybe you'll be here, maybe you won't. And yet a few years down the road, you will die in a bed somewhere. Could have been this last couple of weeks. He says, you will die in a bed somewhere. Whether there's somebody there or not, doesn't make any difference. But you know what? He looked at me and said, you know what, Tom? I said, what's that? He said, you're going to be as dead as me. Now, I'm here to tell you, a new, brilliant young minister of 24 years of age, starting his first ministry, does not need to hear that. Or does he? Jesus said, make ready your heart, make ready your house, and keep it in order. Didn't he say that? The day and the hour, you don't know. It'll just be. It'll just be. And that'll be it. There'll be no more woulda, coulda, if'a. It'll just be over. Just like that. I said, well, that sucks. Well, that's creation. You know what? I had the most beautiful tomatoes 2 weeks ago on my bush. Now I got little frozen withered nuggets. If you want some frozen withered tomato nuggets, I can give them to you. I forgot to pick my tomatoes and they got froze. Most part they exploded, and all the goo comes out. Those big scarlet heirloom tomatoes, they're like purple, really good. Now they're frozen scarlet nuggets. Just like that, my whole crop's wiped out. My beans, my snot beans, all dead. And I was waiting for them. They were just now getting about that. Just like that. And it was nothing more than the weather dipped down below 30 degrees. Or 32, whatever it is. Went to 29 the other night. Killed everything. I've worked on that since September. Been working on that garden since September. And just like that, it's out of here. I would have gone out and harvested, but I was too sick to do it. I just said, I'm going to do it. So the tomatoes have flopped to dust. See, they set their tomato house in order, but they didn't keep it in order. All right, I won't belabor the point. But these are questions you have to ask yourself internally. Psalm 119 is a beautiful pilgrimage of a man who, having been born in the Lord, begins to grow. And he goes through every aspect of his being: a young child, a young adult, like a teenager, an adolescent, and then a young adult, and then a married, involved individual with other lives involved, and then, middle age, and then on to the transition from middle age, but not quite to the golden years yet. Sort of where I am now, sort of like almost a geezer, but not quite. And then into the geezer years, the golden years, and ultimately he faces his own death, and he does die. And it's that last verse that's so magnificent when he readies himself for the Lord. But throughout the whole course of this, he continues to ask himself, have I stepped out of God's path? And if I have, am I sorry for it? Can I get back to it? And how can I not step out of it again? And he takes a spiritual inventory 3 major times, actually 5 altogether, throughout the course of Psalm 119. It's a very long psalm, by the way. But it's about a man saying, nobody's responsible for me and my spiritual walk with God other than me. It ain't my husband. It ain't my wife. It ain't the church. It's not Chanter. It's not the denomination. It's me. Me and only me. Because you know what? He comes to the realization, this is supposedly David, by the way. When he gets to the end of the road, he says, it's just going to be me standing before the Lord. No one else is going to be there to testify on my behalf. My own life will either speak for me or against me. And it's brilliant. That's why it's called the wisdom literature of God. Psalm 119 is that story. Well, that story began a long time ago when God decided to take His people out of slavery, bring them down here and say, you are now my people. I will be with you, but this is what you must do. This is the requirement. You do what I ask you to do, we'll be fine. You step out, we're going to have a problem. All right? And really all of life to this day, even including Christ and the crucifixion, the catalyst of the forgiveness of sin. But that saving efficacy of that cross doesn't come automatic. You've got to walk on day to day, as Paul says. You've got to pray without ceasing. You've got to live each day as if you stand in the presence of God. That saving efficacy of that cross is not automatic. Oh, I believe in Jesus. Okay, I'm saved. Nonsense. Your life will prove whether you're saved. Okay? That's all I got, folks. I know that otherwise Exodus is incredibly boring. But if you look beyond the simple construction of a tent and a box, there's much more happening here, at least in the eyes of God and His people, than what you think. All right?